So, we have come to the last lap of this lecture series, and as we already said that we will discuss a bit about a case study on citation networks. So, from the rest of this lectures we will discuss mostly how one can build such big networks and extract various interesting properties from these networks. Okay. We have already defined the idea of citation networks in one of the earlier classes in the initial lectures, but in order to recap, so let us look at the slides. So, here I draw a citation network where each node represents a paper or a scientific article, and if a particular scientific article refers to another scientific article, then you draw a directed edge like this. So, this particular scientific article has in its reference list the name of this particular scientific article, and in this way you construct this network. So, basically this is a directed graph which has both the concept of out degree, which is the total number of edges or citation edges that go out from this node, and also in degree, that is the total number of citation edges that enter into this particular node. So, here the out degree, for example, for this particular node is equal to 3, whereas the in degree for this particular node is equal to 1. Moreover, another interesting property of these citation networks is that they can be constructed over a timeline. So, basically papers get published at a particular time, and citations can be made to only the earlier papers. So, it is not possible to cite some paper which has not been written so far. So, that is why only edges point backward in time. You see, here is the time, but time is in this direction. So, edges only point backward in time, because you cannot actually refer to something which has not been written so far, and therefore, this graph does not usually have a directed cycle. So, with these basic notions we will try to see what can be a way to construct large citation networks and then do meaningful citation analysis on these networks. So, to start off, the dataset that we will consider is crawled or is built from the Microsoft Academic Search dataset, which is a publicly online repository, from where at least 2.4 million entries were crawled, 2.4 million papers like these scientific articles, 2.4 million such papers were crawled. The total number of authors across all these were around 11 lakhs. Number of unique venues, journals or conferences where these papers were published is like around 6,000. Average number of papers per author is like 5, and average number of authors per paper. So, usually in computer science, so this data is mostly related to the computer science field. Usually in computer science, what is observed is that most articles are written by 2 or 3 authors. Okay. So, usually you do not see papers written by 10-20 authors as you see in other domains like biology. So, further this data is also segregated into fields. So, basically along with each paper you also know to which field that paper belongs to which field that scientific article belongs to. So, for instance, the 24 fields that is considered in this dataset are these: artificial intelligence, algorithms and theory, networking, databases, distributed and parallel computing, and so on and so forth. So, there are 24 such fields of computer science, and this is the proportion of papers that are available in the dataset from each different field. So, basically what you have along with this particular graph, you also know that whether this particular paper belongs to algorithms, or it belongs to artificial intelligence, or it belongs to databases, or whatever field it belongs. So, you have the field information for each particular paper along with the simple citation information. So, with this we start off the preliminary analysis. So, the first thing that we define is called the authoritativeness of a field. This is basically nothing but the total number of citation links that are coming to a particular field from other fields. So, let us take an example and see. So, for instance, if you have papers from two different fields, say this is AI for artificial intelligence and this is databases, okay. And now there are certain citations going from AI to databases and there are certain citations that are coming from databases to AI. So, you basically find out by the authority measure, you find out what is the total number of citations that are coming to AI from all other fields, say databases, algorithms, okay. So, what is the fraction of citations that are coming from all other fields to AI normalized by the total number of papers that are published in AI. So, that is basically what is the fraction of citations that each paper in AI is enjoying from other fields, that is what we want to quantify. So, that would tell you what is the authority of AI. So, basically that would tell you in some sense the importance of the field AI. So, that is telling you what is the total number of incitations that the field of AI is enjoying from all other different fields. So, you are trying to estimate what is the fraction of citations that each paper in AI gets from all other different fields, not including AI. So, this tells you what is the authoritativeness of AI over all other fields. So, this is a very simple measure that we define, and we see that this simple measure actually gives certain very interesting signals as we see in the next slide. So, if you plot or if you write down the values of these authority scores for the different decades. So, as I said that the citation network is a timeline network. So, there is a time information. So, if you look at the citation network of 60 to 69, 1960 to 69, then you can look the next decade 70 to 79, 80 to 89, 90 to 99 and 2000 to 2008. So, in each decade you see that there are some fields who have very high authority scores. For instance, in the first decade 60 to 69, the two fields that have the largest authority score are algorithms and databases. So, immediately you observe that this was the time when computer science was in its infancy, computer science was still growing, and this was the time when the basic principles of computer science were being developed. So, these principles were mostly developed in the fields of algorithms and databases. That is why these are the two most authoritative fields of that decade. In the next decade, the same observation continues, algorithms and databases. So, still the field is developing. In the third decade, you already see a difference. So, you see that AI has received a very high authority score, as well as the other field that has received a very high authority score is the programming language. So, AI has received a very high authority score because this was the time, 80s was the time when computer science saw the AI boom. People were trying to do everything, solve all problems using AI techniques. So, that is why a lot of researchers were working in this area, a lot of papers were being published, there was a lot of interest actually in this area, and that is why the authority score has risen up. The authority score of PL has risen up because this was the time, this was the decade when lots of programming languages were being written like C, C++, etc. The compilers were being constructed in this particular decade. If you look at the next decade, AI is still at the top, but then there is another field, another interesting observation that networks has entered in. So, network has also received a very high authority score. Note that this is the decade when we had the internet boom. So, internet had crept in at this particular decade, and that is why there was a lot of research going on in networks, in internet and networks. So, that is why the authority score of networks has also come up. And in the last decade you see that AI is still at the top, but then there is another field that has gained a lot of importance, which is machine learning, and this is very apparent now. Every other school, every other top school has a machine learning course and has one or more machine learning courses, and this has become one of the hottest topics of the computer science area. So, this simple analysis of the citation networks based on the field information and the authority score that we defined in the last slide actually clearly shows how the authority of the different fields has changed over time, how the importance of the different fields have changed over time. So, in order to further look at this interesting behavior at a more micro level, we draw something called the time transition diagram. So, this is a diagram that is usually drawn in various physics experiments. So, what you do here is, on the x axis you have the timeline from 1960 to 2005, and on the y axis you plot the authority score for the two top ranking fields based on the authority score. So, the top one and the second one. So, the top one in the first few years, as we see, is algorithms followed by databases. Then in the next few years it is databases followed by algorithms, and it keeps on going like this. So, one very interesting observation that you have from this particular slide is that, look, in any particular time window, if some field is in the second rank, then in the second time window, then in the immediate next time window, that field becomes the top rank field. So, basically this is a very interesting observation, and this holds for 100% cases. So, what you observe in a previous time window, if there is a particular field which is at the second rank of authority score, then it comes at the top rank in the next particular time window. So, this tells you that this actually gives you an indication that if you know the current second ranking field in terms of authority score, then you already know who is going to be the topper in the next set of time window. So, that actually can also give you a hint of which field you should pursue your research career in. Basically, the field which is like the hot field, which has a very high authority score, you would always hope to pursue your research career in that particular field. And if you want to pre-estimate what field that would be, you have to look into the second ranking field of the current time window. If you can tell what is the second ranking field of the current time window, then you can tell with 100% guarantee that this guy is going to be the top ranker of the next field, and this is the field that I should work on, because this is going to be the hottest field of the next time window, and that is happening in at least 100% cases in our data set. So, that is a very interesting observation that we make. So, now the next immediate question that we have is that, why do we see such a property? Why certain fields have a high authority value compared to other fields? Can there be some systematic analysis of what could be the ground reasons for a particular field to have a high authority score? So, for that we study two properties. One is the property of the high impact papers, and the other is the support from the backup fields. So, I will define one of each of them one by one. So, what do we mean by high impact papers? So, we take in every time window, we take the papers which are top cited papers. So, that have received the largest number of citations, that is the highest in degree papers, okay, of that particular decade. We take the top 10% of such papers. Okay. So, if you rank all the papers based on their citation counts, based on their in degree values, and take the top 10% of these set, then that is what we call the high impact papers. Now, we see that what is the proportion of high impact papers from a particular field, and as you see that in the first time window where algorithms was at the top, the largest fraction. So, all the papers in the top 10% is from the algorithms field itself. You see, the authority score of algorithms is highest, and also we see that the top 10% highly cited papers in computer science, all of them are from algorithms area. So, basically what I want to pass on is that if you have a particular field which is high on authority score, that means it has a large fraction of high impact papers. So, similarly in the next time window you see that databases has a large fraction of high impact papers, and this continues, this observation continues, and this actually holds true for at least 82% cases. Similarly, there is this concept of backup fields. So, basically if your in degree is high, then that in degree is actually derived from somebody else's out degree. So somebody else is citing you, that is why you are highly cited, right. So somebody else is actually citing you, that is why you are highly cited. So if you assume this to be true, then those people who are citing you to make you highly cited are called the backup fields. So and we see that if a particular authority field is having a high authority score, then it is enjoying a lot of support from its backup fields. So there are many other fields who provide you with citations. So there are a lot of backup fields which support your citation basically. And what happens towards the transition, the support from the backup field gets reduced. That happens actually in 75% of the cases in our data. So basically the backup fields actually retract their votes from you. Somehow the interest of the papers in the backup field gets reduced in the papers from the high authority field. So that is why they retract their citations from the high authority field, and immediately the score of the high authority field falls. Okay. So this is an observation that we see that holds true in 75% of the cases. So we also further did some more interesting analysis. So I would now introduce to you the concept of proposal submission. So National Science Foundation is a body which actually gives funding for doing research. So it gives funding to different academic institutes in the United States for doing research. Similar body in India is the Department of Science and Technology or Department of Information Technology. They give you funds in order to do meaningful research. Okay. So now if we do an analysis of the areas in which proposals were submitted in the different years from 2003 to 2008, we see that in 2003 the top 3 areas in which proposals were submitted in the National Science Foundation, top 3 areas in which research proposals were submitted by different academic institutes are networking, artificial intelligence and human computer interfaces. Now among these, if you see in 2003, according to authority scores, the score that we defined in the last slide, based on that authority score, the top 3 rank fields are AI, information retrieval and networks. You see 2 out of these 3 fields are also present here. So this shows that there is really a lot of interest in these areas at that particular point in time. So actually the proposal submission data is very much similar to the data that is ranked by the authority score, and that is true for all the years. The proposal awarded means where money flows in, the proposal submitted is very much correlated, whereas the proposal awarded depends on many other factors. So there you mostly see that there is only one overlap. So it is not only based on the volume of proposal submitted, but the merit of the proposal, and there are many other things that actually goes into which proposals will be finally funded. So that is why there you do not have a very strong correlation with the authority scores, but in terms of the interest which is shown by the number of proposals submitted, you see that there is a high overlap. So this is another interesting observation that one can make. So the next concept that we will discuss is nicely introduced in this particular figure. So what you see in this picture, this is a very interesting picture. You see that there is one particular tool which has many other small tools included in it in the same framework, whereas there are other tools that are separate in themselves. Okay. So this actually is very nicely correlated to one of the rising or leading concepts in various scientific disciplines, which is called interdisciplinarity. So basically the way people propose to do research in current times is through interdisciplinary practices. So basically the idea is that now you cannot do well in research if you look into one single field. You have to like cross your borders and look at various different disciplines, borrow concepts from various different disciplines. Even while your discipline is computer science, you have to borrow concepts from, say, physics, from chemistry, from biology, in order to do meaningful and cutting edge research. That is the mantra of interdisciplinary practices in research. So, and interdisciplinarity is the talk of the current day, is the way that all the experts suggest one should do research in a interdisciplinary framework. Okay. So, that is why studying interdisciplinarity within computer sciences is also very important. So, the question is like how one can actually describe or quantify mathematically the concept of interdisciplinarity. That is what we will see in the next few slides. The basic idea is very clear. If you want to become a good researcher, you have to be an interdisciplinary researcher. You have to have knowledge in depth in one particular area, but you also have to have knowledge in breadth in many other areas in order to do successful research. So, the point is that now the question that we try to ask is whether we also see certain signals of interdisciplinarity in computer sciences itself, and it turns out that we actually do see such signals in computer sciences also. So, in order to define the concept of interdisciplinarity, we will bring in certain metrics into definition. So, the first metric that we will talk about is the reference diversity index or RDI. So, basically what you try to measure here is take a paper, okay, from a particular field, and you try to see what is the reference set of this paper, what are the other papers that this particular paper is referring to, and you see what is the fraction of references that is going to a particular field. Suppose there is a paper P1 and it has say 5-6 references like this. Now, the first 2 references, say it goes to databases, say this paper is from the field of AI, the first 2 goes to databases, the second 2 goes to algorithms, the third 3 goes to networks. Suppose you have a one paper like this, whereas there is another paper P2 also from the field AI, which again has some references, but all of them going to AI itself. So, immediately you see that there is a difference in the referencing style of the paper P1 from the paper P2. So, we can see that paper P1 actually invokes a lot of references from different fields. Okay. So, there is a notion of interdisciplinarity here. So, paper P1 actually refers to various different fields while writing the paper, whereas paper P2 actually invokes all its references from one single field, and therefore, the chance is that it is not very highly interdisciplinary. So, the question is that whether one can actually quantify this particular concept. Now, we try to quantify this concept in terms of all papers present in a field. You try to find out what is the fraction of references that are going for every individual paper, what is the fraction of references going to each individual field. Now, if you say that fraction, the fraction of references going to field J is Pj, then you basically find out Pj log Pj, which is the entropy. Okay. You find out the entropy, that is the fraction of references that is going to a particular field J. Say for the paper P1, fraction of references going to DB, fraction of references going to algo, and so on and so forth. So, you find these fractions and you find out Pj log Pj, and then you do a sum of Pj log Pj, which is nothing but the entropy. So, basically if this entropy value for a paper is high, then you know that this paper is actually making references to various other fields. So, that means the indication that it is more interdisciplinary, whereas if this value is low, then this paper is actually not highly interdisciplinary. So basically based on this value of interdisciplinarity, this value of entropy, you can have a shallow notion of interdisciplinarity. So you find out the proportion of references that goes to each field, okay, from a particular paper in a particular field, and then you find out the fraction, and then you express this fraction as an entropy, and if this entropy is high, then you call this particular field to be interdisciplinary, whereas if this value is low, then you call this particular field to be not highly interdisciplinary. So now if you take all papers from the World Wide Web and you see what is the fraction of references that is going to other different fields. So World Wide Web is a field which includes mostly graph theory, social networks, analysis from Twitter, Facebook and things like that. Now if you see the fraction of references that are going to other fields is like to information retrieval, it is the total fraction of references is 16%, to human computer interaction it is 13%, networks 32% and so on and so forth. Similarly, for the field natural language processing, this is the distribution or the proportion of references from the papers of NLP going to the papers of other fields. So now given this definition of RDI, you can very nicely calculate the, from these proportions you can very nicely calculate the entropy values. Now based on these entropy values, you can basically rank the different fields. So if you look at the window 1975 to 79, you see a ranking like this. So initial so the fields that are at the top of the rank are networks, OS, etc. Whereas as you go on over the timeline and you come to 2004 2008, some of the fields that you see are data mining, multimedia, World Wide Web and things like that. So these actually are really interdisciplinary fields, because if you look at the World Wide Web or the data mining community, these communities actually do a lot of references to many other different communities, whereas communities like operating systems, architectures, they do most of their references, most of the papers refer to the papers of operating systems and of architecture only, hardly they would refer to papers from other fields. So that's why they come at the bottom of the rank list, whereas fields like data mining and World Wide Web come at the top of the rank list. In the later lectures, we will look into some other ways of quantifying interdisciplinarity, and then we will see a complete framework by which we can find out what fields in computer science are really interdisciplinary and what fields are not interdisciplinary, more sort of a core. So this is what we will do in the next lecture. Thank you.